Rain fell softly on the courthouse steps, washing away the morning dust but not the tension in the air. Keisha Williams, dressed in a plain gray suit, clutched her briefcase as she approached the main entrance. Her eyes were calm, confident, the way someone looks when they know exactly where they belong. But to the three uniformed officers standing by the metal detectors, she was just another black woman trying to enter a place where they didn't think she belonged. "Ma'am, this area's restricted," barked Officer Martinez, blocking her way. Keisha paused, polite but firm. "I work here," she said, raising her badge. "I'm due inside for a hearing at 9. Martinez's eyes narrowed. He didn't look at the badge. He looked at her skin, her suit, her calm tone, and it irritated him. "Don't play games," he sneered. "Where'd you steal that?" Before Keisha could reply, Martinez snatched the briefcase from her hand, spilling papers across the wet marble. Legal documents scattered like fallen feathers. Keisha bent to pick them up, but Martinez's open palm cracked against her cheek, hard enough to echo across the steps. Gasps came from a few bystanders. Her head snapped sideways, but her posture stayed straight. Her eyes lifted slowly, not with anger, but with quiet, icy control. "You just made a serious mistake," she said softly. Martinez grabbed her arm roughly. "The only mistake is you thinking you can talk back to me. Hands behind your back." He twisted her wrists into handcuffs as two other officers laughed quietly. "Got another one," one muttered. As Keisha stood cuffed, bruised, and humiliated in front of her own courthouse, a small brass plaque glimmered above the doors. The Honorable Judge K. Williams, Courtroom 3B. Martinez didn't notice it, but the irony burned through the rain. Inside, the officers dragged her into the courtroom like a criminal. The substitute Judge Harrison looked up in confusion. "What's this?" "Your Honor," Martinez began smoothly, "this woman was acting suspicious near the entrance carrying stolen documents. She resisted arrest." Keisha sat silently, blood on her lip, staring straight ahead. "Do you have ID?" Harrison asked her. Keisha's voice was calm, steady. "I did." He refused to look at it. Martinez laughed. "She claims she's someone important, Your Honor. They all do." The courtroom chuckled lightly. Keisha's gaze didn't waver. "Every lie you tell today," she said slowly, "will come back to you." Her tone sent a chill through the air. For the first time, Martinez hesitated. There was something in her voice, something commanding, something familiar, but he recovered quickly. "Your Honor, people like her always play the victim, always claiming discrimination." Judge Harrison sighed. "Let's proceed. The state recommends charges for trespassing and resisting arrest." Keisha remained silent as laughter rippled again through the room. Her silence wasn't weakness, it was preparation. Every word they spoke, every sneer, every false accusation, she was memorizing them, because she knew what they didn't. In a few minutes, the truth would walk into this courtroom wearing black robes, and justice would finally rise. 15 minutes later, the courtroom was still buzzing. Officer Martinez leaned against the wall, confident and relaxed, his version of events neatly typed in the official record. He'd done this before, too many times to count. To him, this was routine. Another unruly suspect, another easy win. But beneath the calm surface, the atmosphere was shifting. A few clerks whispered nervously, replaying Keisha's words in their minds. There was something about the way she spoke, measured, precise, like someone used to commanding a courtroom, not pleading in one. Judge Harrison cleared his throat. "Let's resume. The defendant may speak." Keisha stood slowly, wrists still in cuffs. Her cheek was swollen, her lips split, yet she radiated quiet strength. "Thank you, Your Honor." Her voice carried effortlessly, echoing through the silent chamber. "I've listened carefully to Officer Martinez's testimony. I only wish truth had been among the oaths he took this morning." A ripple of unease ran through the room. Martinez smirked, crossing his arms. "Here we go again. Playing the victim." Keisha didn't look at him. "Officer Martinez claims I was trespassing. I was on a public sidewalk, approaching this courthouse for official business." Her tone sharpened. "He also claims I carried stolen legal documents. Those documents, Your Honor, are pending case files, signed under my authority. Judge Harrison frowned. Your authority? Keisha nodded. Yes, Your Honor, because those files belong to my courtroom. Martinez laughed, but his voice trembled slightly. Your courtroom? Lady, you're delusional. Keisha's gaze turned toward him, calm and deadly. Delusion is believing you can assault someone without consequence. She continued, voice steady as stone. Your Honor, I'd like to request that all surveillance footage from the courthouse entrance between 8:45 and 9:15 a.m. be preserved and reviewed. The prosecutor objected sharply. She's not a lawyer. She can't make legal requests. But Keisha smiled faintly. Under the Sixth Amendment, every defendant has the right to present evidence in their own defense. You do know that, don't you? The courtroom fell silent again. The clerk paused mid-typing. The bailiff's eyes widened. Judge Harrison hesitated. You seem very familiar with legal procedure. Keisha took a slow breath. I should be, Your Honor. It's part of my job. She turned slightly, facing the gallery. Officer Martinez said I claimed to be someone important. I didn't claim anything, but I will now clarify who I am. From her jacket pocket, she withdrew a small black leather wallet, the kind used by court officials. She opened it carefully, revealing a gold seal. Judge Harrison leaned forward, eyes widening. Martinez's smirk vanished. My name, she said clearly, is Keisha Williams, federal judge, appointed 12 years ago to this very courthouse. Gasps filled the air. Martinez's face went pale. The room froze in collective shock. Keisha lifted her cuffed wrist slightly. And this morning, Officer Martinez assaulted me on my way to preside over a hearing in this building. The prosecutor stumbled backward, whispering, Dear God. Judge Harrison's gavel slipped from his hand. The sound echoed through the courtroom like thunder. Keisha's voice softened, but her eyes burned with power. You see, Officer Martinez, you told this court that actions have consequences. You were right. She looked directly at him. Yours are about to begin. The bailiff hurried to unlock her cuffs, his hands trembling. No one dared to speak. For the first time, Martinez understood what real fear felt like. Not from the woman he'd struck, but from the truth standing before him, unshaken. And as Keisha lifted her chin, the storm of justice gathered behind her calm eyes. The courthouse corridors buzzed like a shaken hive. Word spread fast. The defendant Officer Martinez arrested was Judge Keisha Williams herself. Clerks whispered in disbelief, lawyers stopped mid-conversation, and even the janitor stood frozen, mop in hand. But inside the small holding room, Keisha sat quietly, her hands resting on her lap, her heartbeat steady. Bailiff Henderson entered, his face pale. Judge Williams, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. When they brought you in, Keisha raised a hand gently. You had no part in this, Henderson, but now I need your help. Anything, Your Honor, he said quickly. Go to my chambers. Bring my black judicial robes, the ones with gold trim, and my gavel. Henderson nodded and hurried off, leaving her alone. For a brief moment, Keisha allowed herself to breathe. The sting of the slap still burned her cheek, but the fire in her spirit burned brighter. She thought of every person who had faced injustice in silence, every citizen who didn't have a voice strong enough to fight back. Her phone, just returned to her, buzzed with frantic messages. Her clerk, Janet Morrison, had written, Judge Williams, where are you? The Peterson case is waiting. Everyone's confused. Keisha typed back, Clear my schedule. Justice is about to take a different form today. Then she dialed a number from memory, Chief Judge Margaret Carter. The line picked up instantly. Keisha, we heard there was an incident. Are you okay? Keisha's voice was calm but cold. Margaret, I need all surveillance footage from the courthouse entrance between 8:45 and 9:15 a.m. Secured immediately. Every angle, every camera. What happened? Margaret asked, alarmed. A police officer named Martinez assaulted me on the steps, called me a filthy animal, said I belonged in a cage. Silence. Then a hiss of disbelief. Good God. Keisha, do you want me to call the FBI? Not yet, she replied. First, I want the truth preserved. Then justice can follow. A knock on the door interrupted her. Henderson returned carrying her robe in a garment bag and her gavel in a polished wooden box. Your robes, Your Honor. Keisha stood, unfolding the black fabric. As she slipped into it, something shifted, dignity reborn. The gold trim glimmered faintly under the dim lights, and the air itself seemed to change. This robe, she murmured, smoothing the sleeves, is not just cloth. It's a promise. That power will never protect cruelty. She opened the box, lifting her gavel. The inscription on the handle read, "Justice is blind, but she sees all." Keisha smiled faintly. Perfect. Henderson swallowed hard. How should I announce you, Your Honor? She met his eyes. The same way you always do. A few minutes later, the doors to courtroom 3B opened again. The crowd fell silent. Henderson's voice rang out with authority. All rise. Court is now in session. The Honorable Judge Keisha Williams presiding. Every head turned. Martinez's confidence shattered. His face drained of color as he saw her, the same woman he'd handcuffed, now walking calmly to the bench in full robes, chin high, eyes blazing with power. Judge Harrison stumbled to his feet. Your Honor, I didn't. Keisha raised a hand. Thank you for covering my courtroom, Judge Harrison. You may return to your docket. I'll take it from here. He nearly tripped as he left. The room was silent but electric. Keisha sat behind the bench, the same bench from which she had delivered justice for over 2 decades. She looked down at Martinez. Officer Martinez, you may remain standing. His knees shook. 2 hours ago, she began softly, you testified under oath about a so-called criminal. You described her as dangerous, unstable, and violent. Her eyes locked on his. Would you like to amend that testimony now? The silence was suffocating. Martinez tried to speak, but his voice cracked. Keisha leaned forward. You said, and I quote, these people always claim to be lawyers, judges, senators, anything to avoid accountability. Do you recall those words? He nodded weakly. Good, she said, her voice cutting like steel, because now accountability has arrived, and it's wearing the very robes you mocked. The courtroom was frozen in stunned silence. Every eye fixed on Judge Keisha Williams as she adjusted her robes and opened a folder on the bench. The soft click of the clasp echoed like a hammer striking fate. Officer Martinez stood motionless, his hands trembling slightly, his earlier arrogance replaced by dread. Officer Martinez, Keisha began evenly, you gave sworn testimony this morning, correct? Yes, Your Honor, he murmured, voice barely audible. And you swore to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. He nodded. Good, she said, tapping her gavel lightly. Then we will let the truth speak for itself. Keisha gestured to the bailiff. Henderson, please bring the tablet. He obeyed quickly, placing the screen before her. The judge pressed play, and the courtroom's massive display flickered to life. Grainy security footage filled the screen, the courthouse steps that morning bathed in gray rain. The crowd leaned forward. There she was, Keisha, walking calmly, carrying her briefcase. And there was Martinez stepping in front of her, blocking the path, sneer on his face. Then it happened. The slap. The papers flying. The shove. His words rang out clearly through the courtroom speakers. Filthy animals like you don't belong in courthouses. The sound sliced through the room like a blade. A collective gasp filled the air. Martinez's head dropped into his hands. He looked as if he wanted to vanish. Keisha paused the footage, her tone steady. Is that your voice, officer? He swallowed hard. Yes, Your Honor. And do you see any aggression from me in this video? Any resistance? He couldn't answer. Then, she continued, perhaps the malfunctioning body cam you mentioned was less a technical issue and more selective memory. Whispers rippled through the audience. Keisha turned to the prosecutor. Ms. Walsh, are you satisfied with the evidence now? The woman looked shaken. I had no idea, Your Honor. I believe the report. That, Keisha said softly, is the heart of the problem. You believe the uniform over the truth. She turned her gaze back to Martinez. Tell me, officer, how many others have you treated this way? How many voices were silenced because you knew no one would question you? Tears welled in his eyes. I don't know. Keisha leaned forward. Well, I do, because every person you wronged is about to have their case reopened. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Silence, she commanded. Her voice was thunder now, the kind of power that doesn't need to shout twice. Justice, she said, is not a costume we wear when convenient. It is a responsibility, one you've disgraced. Martinez tried to speak. Your Honor, please, I didn't know who you were. Keisha's gaze hardened. And that's exactly the point. You shouldn't have to know someone's title to treat them with dignity. The words landed like verdicts. She looked to Henderson. Bailiff, take Officer Martinez into custody pending a full internal investigation. He froze. Wait, what? Yes, Keisha said calmly. You'll face charges of perjury, assault, and obstruction of justice. Henderson moved forward, handcuffs glinting under the courtroom lights. The same cold metal Martinez had used on her now found his wrists. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. As he was led away, Keisha's eyes softened. Not with pity, but with purpose. This is what accountability looks like, she said quietly. The uniform does not make the man. His chi, oases do. The gallery stood in silence. Even the air seemed to bow. Keisha took a slow breath and lifted her gavel. This court stands adjourned. The gavel struck once, sharp and final. The sound of justice reborn. The next morning, the courthouse steps looked different. The rain had stopped, but the echoes of yesterday's storm lingered in every whispered conversation. Newspapers across the city carried the same headline. Cop arrested after assaulting federal judge. Cameras crowded the courthouse entrance, reporters calling her name, microphones flashing like lightning. Judge Keisha Williams stepped out of her car, wearing her robes, face calm and composed. The bruise on her cheek was faint now, but she made no effort to hide it. It was a symbol, a reminder of what she and so many others had endured in silence. Inside, courtroom 3B was packed. Lawyers, students, citizens, even police officers sat quietly. Everyone wanted to witness what justice looked like when it no longer feared power. When Keisha entered, the bailiff's voice filled the room. All rise. The Honorable Judge Keisha Williams presiding. She took her seat, her eyes scanning the crowd. You may be seated. Her tone was calm, but the air was electric. Before this court resumes its regular docket, she said, I must address what happened yesterday. Not for my sake, but for the sake of every person who has ever stood in this courtroom and felt unheard. No one moved. No one blinked. I was assaulted, she continued, not because of who I am, but because of what I look like. That officer didn't see a judge. He saw a target, a woman whose dignity he thought he could take. A murmur passed through the crowd, heavy with guilt and reflection. But I will not let one man's hatred define this institution. The system is only as fair as the people who uphold it, and fairness begins with accountability. She gestured toward the clerk. The court has received confirmation from the Department of Justice. Officer Martinez has been suspended without pay, and a federal investigation has begun into all prior cases he's touched. Each will be reviewed for misconduct. A low gasp spread across the room. Some smiled, some wiped tears. Keisha continued, her voice unwavering. But this is bigger than one man. Yesterday proved how quickly assumptions can destroy truth. Every person in uniform, every official, every citizen must remember, respect is not earned by power, it is earned by humanity. A young law clerk stood in the back, tears in her eyes. Your Honor, she said softly, thank you. Keisha gave a small nod. Don't thank me. Thank the truth. It never stays buried. She looked toward the reporters sitting quietly in the back row. You want a headline? She asked. Here it is. Justice doesn't wear a color. Justice wears courage. A powerful hush fell over the room. Even the walls seemed to listen. She turned to the gallery. I will continue to serve this court, not as a victim, but as a reminder that the robe I wear means nothing if I forget the people it was meant to protect. Her eyes softened. Yesterday, I was humiliated. Today I stand with pride. Tomorrow we make sure no one else has to go through what I did. For a moment, no one spoke. Then, one by one, people began to stand. First the clerk, then the prosecutor, then even officers from the back row, all standing in silent respect. Keisha rose slowly, her voice steady as she lifted the gavel. "Court is adjourned," she said, "but justice has just begun." The gavel struck once, echoing like thunder across history. As the courtroom emptied, Keisha remained seated, staring at the sunlight breaking through the tall windows. For the first time in years, she felt something pure. Hope. Because she knew this wasn't just her victory. It was every person's victory who had ever been silenced, doubted, or dismissed. And in that quiet, sacred space of justice, Keisha Williams whispered to herself, "Respect everyone, because you never know who's wearing the robe tomorrow." Days turned into weeks, but the shock of that morning never faded. The footage of Officer Martinez's assault had gone viral, viewed by millions around the world. Hashtags filled social media, hashtag justice for Keisha, hash respect all, hash truth in uniform. News anchors called her the judge who judged back, while activists hailed her as a symbol of courage in the face of systemic bias. Yet through all the noise, Judge Keisha Williams remained calm. She didn't chase cameras or interviews. She returned to work quietly, her bruises healed, but her purpose sharpened like a blade. The courthouse, once a place of silent hierarchy, now hummed with new awareness. Officers who once laughed at whispered jokes now stood straighter, spoke softer, thought twice before raising their voices. Her name alone had become a reminder. Power means nothing without respect. On a gray Tuesday morning, Keisha entered courtroom 3B once more, her bench polished, her gavel resting exactly where she'd left it. Today wasn't about revenge. It was about restoration. She opened the session. "Before we begin," she said, "this court will hear final updates on the investigation into Officer Martinez and his associates." The federal investigator rose. "Your Honor, the review uncovered multiple falsified reports, wrongful arrests, and misuse of authority. The department has dismissed 5 officers, including Martinez, who now faces charges of assault, perjury, and civil rights violations." A low murmur filled the room. Keisha nodded once solemnly. "Justice served," she said softly. But she wasn't finished. "The system failed long before that slap," she continued, voice steady. "It failed when truth became a matter of status, when appearance replaced evidence, when silence became safer than honesty." Her words were neither angry nor bitter. They were pure, deliberate truth. "Injustice," she said, "doesn't always arrive shouting. Sometimes it whispers through polite rooms and polished uniforms. But as long as I sit on this bench, those whispers will not go unheard." Every person in the gallery listened in complete silence. Even the air felt still. Then Keisha looked toward the young law clerk, Janet, who had been her assistant through the chaos. "Janet," she said gently, "please read the new oath drafted for all officers assigned to this courthouse." Janet stood and read aloud. "I swear to protect not just the law but the dignity of every person I serve, without prejudice, without assumption, without fear, because justice is not a privilege, it's a promise." Applause rose from the crowd, soft at first, then swelling until the sound filled the room. Keisha's eyes glistened. "That," she said, "is how we rebuild faith, in words, in actions. In every single moment, we choose fairness over pride." After court adjourned, as the room emptied, a young black girl timidly approached the bench. "Judge Williams," she asked, "can I shake your hand?" Keisha smiled warmly. "Of course." The girl's small hand trembled as she reached out. "My mama said what you did changed everything. She said you made people like us feel seen." Keisha's eyes softened. "Then remember this, sweetheart," she said gently. "The world may try to silence you, but never let them make you small. Respect yourself first. The rest will follow." The girl nodded, her smile wide and hopeful. As Keisha watched her leave, sunlight spilled through the tall windows, illuminating the golden trim of her robe. For the first time in her long career, she felt peace. Not because the fight was over, but because the truth had finally spoken louder than fear. That evening, as she placed her gavel back in its case, she whispered the words engraved on its handle. Justice is blind, but she sees all. She smiled faintly, and she embers. The courthouse lights dimmed. Outside, the city glowed under the night sky, changed, aware, awakened. Judge Keisha Williams walked out the same doors where she once stood in handcuffs, but this time the world didn't see her as a suspect. It saw her for who she truly was, a woman who turned pain into power, humiliation into hope, and silence into a voice that would echo through generations. Because sometimes justice doesn't come in robes or gavels. Sometimes justice comes when the world finally learns to respect everyone,